Becoming a better runner isn't just about running more miles and listening to David Goggins. If you want to run for longer and run faster, listen to these 5 things that you must do to become a better runner. Over the past 1 to 2 years, running has been heavily trending alongside hybrid training. The problem is that there's a lot of misinformation out there on training, nutrition, and recovery. And there's a lot of people who are beginners diving into these sports who go in with a all-in mindset and expect to be training like some of the people that they see on Instagram and YouTube. The worst part of this is that for a runner, this means that you're going to run into a lot more injuries. And if you're a guy like me who's got that all-in mindset, this means trouble because it's going to stop you from becoming the runner that you could be, and you're going to start to get super burned out, fatigue, and this doesn't only affect your running performance, but it's also going to affect your career and relationships. So the idea of these 5 things is not only to help you improve your running performance and prevent injuries, but also to support the lifestyle that you have and the work that you do as well. And I promise you, if you can start to practice these 5 things, I will guarantee that you become a much better runner. So believe it or not, the first thing that we need to focus on as a runner is our actual running skill, our running technique. One of the primary things that will lead to injuries and poor performance with running is how you do it. Over the past 12 to 18 months in my face-to-face coaching in the gym, I've done a fair few gait analysis assessments, and here are the most common things I find with people's running technique. When we're filming these clients from a posterior view, we tend to notice that they have what we call a control leg. So this is the leg that is landing closer to the midline and it's taking more of the load. Now, usually what leads to this is a pelvic drop where we see one side of the pelvis drop down a little more than the other, and coinciding with this is a lack or a deficit in strength in that hip abduction where we can take away the leg from the midline of the body. Now, whilst I find this one is a little harder to give someone any cues for whilst we're running, something that can help to support this is building more of that hip abduction strength and creating more pelvic control. So doing some isolated hip abduction exercises in the gym, or some unilateral movements like a step up, a step down, or maybe even a single leg Romanian deadlift, or one of these variations can help to build up some of that hip stability, but also increase power output when you're running. Things that you can pay attention to while you do these exercises is just how that pelvis is moving. If you can use a mirror or you've got a coach or someone recording, you can use that as feedback to see how much control you have through that pelvis. And at the same time, if you're doing regular gait analysis, where you have a coach or some sort of health or fitness practitioner being able to coach you and assess you on that movement, that's going to help you get better at this over time. Now, the second biggest thing that I see with people's running gait is the excessive anterior pelvic tilt, meaning their pelvis rolls forward and they create more extension through their lower back. And in conjunction with this, they might have an excessive forward lean. Now, when this happens, your center of mass or center of gravity starts to shift forward, which means there's going to be more stress on your spinal erectors or your lower back muscles. And at the same time, if we're struggling to actually extend the hip, we're not going to get as much power output from our glutes and hamstrings, which is going to inhibit our running performance as a whole. Now, the third thing that I see, particularly with a lot of runners who don't have much experience playing sports or performing any sort of plyometric movements, is they tend to sink into their knees a lot, meaning they get a lot of knee bend upon contact with the ground. This will mean that they start to use their quadriceps more throughout their running gait to produce force, as opposed to relying on their Achilles tendons to do a lot of the work. This leads to less economic running, and it will lead to less power output as well. A common cue that I'll give these people that I stole from another coach when I was on my university placement was pump up your tires. And this means as you start to feel yourself fatiguing on a run, or possibly maybe at the start of the run, starting to pump up those tires, pump up those legs like you're standing a little bit taller, being lighter on your feet and a little more springy. In conjunction with this, you need to start implementing some plyometric training so you can build more tendon stiffness, which is going to help with this issue. Now, the second major thing that you need to be focused on when it comes to becoming a better runner is your actual running program. Now, this doesn't have to have any bells and whistles or be super advanced. In fact, if you're a beginner or even to an intermediate, the simple things will usually work. However, if you're someone with no training program, you're putting yourself at a higher risk of injury, and you're probably not going to get as much out of your running in terms of performance. Now, the whole idea of having a training program for running is to manage your training load. So we allow your body to get enough stress to stimulate better performance in future, but also control the amount of fatigue so we avoid injuries and overtraining. Now, a training program is always going to be very individual. Yes, you could get AI to make this for you. You can go out on the internet and look up a free PDF, and some of these things will work. However, again, you're putting yourself at a higher risk of injury when the training program hasn't been individualized to you. So as a general rule of thumb, if you're someone who's just getting into running, you may only want to be doing about 2 to 3 sessions a week. If you're a little bit more advanced than that and you've been running for a fair while, maybe you could handle 3, 4, possibly even 5 runs. But what should you actually be doing with each of these runs? As a general guideline, 80% of your training should only be performed at low to moderate intensities. The harder or the faster you run means the more impact on your body, and it's also more taxing on your nervous system as a whole. Too much hard running can lead to more injuries, but also the performance on each workout starts to diminish because you haven't had enough recovery to perform at baseline or above. So only 10 to 20% of your running should actually be performed at these higher intensities. Now, if you are someone who is trying to build up their distance so they can perform a 10K, a half marathon, or a full marathon, you should be looking at instilling a long run into your week where you can progressively increase that distance over time with regular deloading, maybe every 4 to 6 weeks. And this is a week where you reduce that volume, let's say around 60%, and then the next week you can start increasing and progressing the distance again. Now, a common rule used amongst coaches and runners is not to increase your training volume any more than 10% each week to make sure that you're not overtraining, but also to prevent injuries. Now, the third thing that is directly going to impact your running performance and can even assist in injury prevention is strength training. However, a common mistake that people make with this is they try to train like a bodybuilder, or something common that I've seen from these endurance athletes is they always want to train high volume and do these circuits and supersets all the time, almost trying to replicate the heart rates that they get during their running sessions. The main thing that we want to focus on with our strength training is increasing how much force we can produce and how rapidly we can produce it. Alongside that, we want to create more resilience, more tolerance to the forces that are being absorbed by our muscles and our tendons so they can handle more and hopefully not get injured over time. My recommendation here is to fit in about 2 to 3 full body strength training sessions in a week where we're looking at performing a squatting movement, maybe a hinge, a single leg movement, performing some lower body plyometrics like some pogos, something like a depth jump where we're jumping off of a box and then maybe jumping back up onto another box, or straight up into the air where it's a more intense movement. Typically with our squats and our deadlift variations, we want to be working between 3 to 8 reps. We don't want the volume too high and we want the weight to be a lot higher so we can start to focus on building more maximal strength when we're beneath that 5 to 6 rep range. And generally speaking, I don't recommend a whole lot of hypertrophy training when it comes to the lower body, especially nothing like a bodybuilding routine, because your legs are just going to be cooked when it comes to your actual running training. However, if you are going to do this, just be smart with where you're putting these harder or higher volume lower body days in your week, making sure that they don't take away too much from your running sessions. And this is a big consideration that you need to make across the board, is how you're stacking your running and your strength training together, or even running training alone. You don't want to be doing a hard day followed by another hard day and another one, because you're just going to put yourself at that higher risk of injury once again, and it's going to reduce the performance in each consecutive session. A common approach that a lot of coaches have here is training high, low, and maybe having a moderate intensity day in there as well, meaning that they have a higher training stimulus or load of stress one day, lower the next, allowing you to recover more, so you can then go harder in that next session, recover, and the one after. As a whole, unless you're getting really serious about your running and maybe your strength training too, I wouldn't recommend doing anything more than 6 sessions in a week. This might be 3 to 4 runs and 2 or 3 strength sessions, or this might be more or less or both, depending on what your goals and abilities are. Now, the fourth point, and you would have guessed that I was going to be in this video anyway, your nutrition. If you're serious about running with a high level of performance, you need to get more serious about how you are fueling your body. One of the worst mistakes that I see as someone who is a sports nutritionist is that people underload on carbohydrate because they get obsessed with these weight loss or fat loss goals, and they think that carbs are going to make them fat, when in actual fact, they are one of the major keys to actually performing as a better athlete. So one of my top recommendations straight off the bat is making sure that you're incorporating a lot of carbohydrates into your diet. If you're consuming these close to or during training sessions, this is where we want to look at less complex carbohydrates. Think more sugary foods and fruits, as these are going to be digested more easily and that energy will be readily available for us to use during these workouts. It is also going to help you to replenish that energy as well for your next training session. Now, when it comes to a long run, think of these runs extending more than 90 minutes or even over an hour. These are ones where you are going to start to deplete your glycogen stores in your body, meaning you're depleting sugar within the muscles. And if you are someone who is possibly in a calorie deficit, maybe you are trying to lose some fat or get the weight down, you need to be more conscious about timing your nutrition in these workouts so you can keep that performance up and avoid fatiguing before the end of the run. A common use here would just be using something like a gel or a chew, which you can simply consume and is going to be readily available during that session. Now, behind carbohydrates, the biggest thing I'm going to recommend is your protein intake. As a general rule of thumb, 2 grams per kilogram of body weight. So if I weigh 85 kilos, that means I want to be consuming 170 grams of protein per day. Now, a quick bonus point for you too. Yes, you can build muscle when you are running. It comes down to your nutrition and having enough stimulus and recovery from your strength training and from your sleep and stress management. If you get this right, you will still be able to build muscle as a runner. Finally, if you are looking to compete in some sort of running event, don't leave your race day nutrition strategy until that week or that day. You need to be practicing this long before so you can avoid gut upset, see what works for you, see what gives you the most fuel, the most energy, and allows you to run your best race. Practice it and then replicate it on race day for best results. Now, the fifth and final point in this video today that is going to help you become a better runner is focusing on optimizing your recovery. Let's make it individual to you as a person though. We know that 8 hours of sleep or even between that 7 to 9 hour mark is usually what most people are going to recommend us. I would definitely be aiming for the higher end of that as your training volume or the intensity starts to build over time, as this is going to demand more recovery. However, a part of you just recovering better is making sure that you structure your training program, your training load properly as well. If you're doing hard sessions or high volume sessions every day, this isn't going to give your body the time to recover. And by the same token, your nutrition is one of your biggest tools for recovery as well. So contrary to popular belief, I'm not going to tell you to go do a sauna, an ice bath, or foam roll today. I'm just going to say optimize your sleep, make sure you're getting enough nutrition, enough fuel into your body, and make sure you're managing your training load so you have got time to recover. So you've got lower intensity days, so you have some active recovery workouts or some recovery runs in the program that actually promote recovery and growth in your body. If you're continuously feeling tired after your rest days, this is a good sign that you probably need a rest week or a deload week from training. A lot of the time, due to the high volume nature of running and throwing strength training into the mix, and I can imagine that you're someone who's working pretty hard, maybe you've got family or relationship responsibilities as well, all of this is going to be stress. So you need to make sure that you give yourself time to recover. Sometimes that's 1 or 2 days in a week, and sometimes it's a full week where you reduce the training load to allow you to bounce back harder, to compensate for the training that you've been doing, and keep improving your fitness over time. Please let me know if this video helped today, or if you want me to dive into the specifics of each of these points. Also, check out my last video that I did about building a better aerobic base so you stop gassing out and fatiguing on your runs. This was actually one of my most successful videos recently, so I'm seeing that you guys enjoy this running content. I do have other things that I'd love to talk about, especially when it comes to men's mental health and performance, but I know running is a big popular trend right now and a lot of people could do with some of this advice. So let me know in the comments if this helps. Now, if you want to take the stress out of programming your running, your strength training, your nutrition, and you also want to focus a little bit more on stress management and building a better, stronger mindset, feel free to DM me on Instagram using the word Forge, and I'll talk to you about the Forge program where I incorporate running, strength training, performance-focused nutrition, breath work, as well as hosting this all through a community of like-minded men. I'm gonna leave the link for that application form in the description of this video here. Otherwise, guys, Let me know what you thought of the video today, and I'll catch you next time.